I had my phone for time, not texting. My sponsor told me not to text from the podium. I'll do my best. Meredith Collins, alcoholic. Sobriety date is August 18th of 2009, and my home group is A Vision for You in Nashville, North Carolina. It says I'm from Elm City down there. That is where I live, but my home group's in Nashville. I'll explain that to you later. We meet on Tuesday nights. We're a big book study group. We meet at 7 o'clock at the Nashville United Methodist Church. And I'm going to hopefully not mess up our format. We study the big book. We read from the first 164 pages the first Tuesday. The second Tuesday, we read a story. The third Tuesday, the second to the last Tuesday is a tradition that correlates with the month. The last Tuesday is a speaker meeting. And if there is 5 Tuesdays, that third Tuesday we'll be back in the big book again. We like being in the big book. And I love my home group. My home group's wonderful. We've been there just over 10 years. We just celebrated 10 years. So that's really cool. That's my second home group, but all my home groups that I've had, both home groups have been absolutely wonderful. I'm a little nervous. While you were reading how it works, my heart started pumping real fast. It doesn't do that in a regular meeting. I noticed that. It's only when I'm getting ready to speak. It's like, whoo, get a little bit more excited for how it works, I guess. We're nervous. But Steve gave me a good prayer beforehand, and he made the statement to God to wrap me in his love and his grace. And that's the story of my story of Alcoholics Anonymous. From the moment I walked into Alcoholics Anonymous, that's what happened. He placed me in a position where I was able to be loved and find grace from you guys, and I'm already going to start crying. That's terrible. And was able to feel the love and grace of God. I really appreciate that prayer, and I thank you for having me tonight. It's been a minute since I've been here. So I'm supposed to tell you what it was like, what happened, and what I'm like today. And so that's what I'm going to do to the best of my ability and hopefully not bore you guys to death. So I was born in I was not born in Wilson. I'm starting out with a lie. That's terrible. I was born in Boone, North Carolina. I only lived there for 3 years. So I go to Wilson. Wilson's where I grew up. I moved there. I actually lived there for 3 years, moved to Winston-Salem, and then moved to Wilson when I was 5. My dad was in the tobacco industry, and so I've been there most of my life. To 2 very loving parents, mom and dad. I was an only child. That's a little bit of my problem. But they were great. I never felt like I was unloved. Dad liked to drink. Mom did too. She didn't drink quite as much as Dad. Dad enjoyed drinking. He really, really did. And we enjoyed drinking together when I got old enough. He would drink. I never saw my dad get violent. He wasn't a violent drunk. He was a good time. And so very, very early in my life, I correlated drinking with a good time. And I wanted to have one. I always wanted to have a good time, still do, just not with alcohol today. And for a long time, I had a really good time drinking until I didn't anymore. So living in Wilson, I was a little bitty girl, as I still am. I've just got my heels on tonight. And I always wanted to be, I don't remember feeling like I was not part of the crowd, but I always wanted to be the baddest, the toughest, the coolest. And I always wanted to fit in with the guys. I had a lot of guys in my neighborhood, so I was always rough and tumble and would try to do everything that they did. I had a pink BMX bike that I rode till the seat fell off. I used to be able to walk across the street barefoot. I was the only one in the neighborhood that could do that. I thought I was super cool, and again, I was tough. And so that continued on as I grew up with my drinking and all that good stuff. But again, I'll get to that in just a second. I do want to touch base with just my relationship with God, because like I said, that love and grace that I felt when I came in here, I didn't have that growing up. God to me existed, and I remember going to church as a child, but that was to see my family. And my family up in Winston-Salem went to church, and whenever we would go visit them, we would go to church. And that was my time I spent with God. I don't remember anybody ever talking about a relationship with God. I remember the stories. Do y'all remember the felt boards that they had in Sunday school? Noah's Ark, Adam and Eve. I remember all those stories, and that's what they were. They were stories. There was no real feeling there. But I always enjoyed going. It was always fun, which I told you guys I like to have fun. And so I always enjoyed going. But when we were in Wilson, we very rarely went. I won't say we never went. If I did go, it was with friends. And every now and then Mom and Dad would want to go. as I got a little bit older, and I'm going to go ahead and get into my drinking early, I remember drinking was just a part of our family. It was just around, whether it be with my uncles, my cousins, whoever. There was always some type of alcohol around, I felt like. And I remember taking sips. I remember I was probably a couple years sober, and you know how things come to us after we're a couple years sober. I got a whiff of something. I was like, I remember that was something I drank back in the day. It was some wine or something that I'd take a sip off my mom's, but nothing that would get me a buzz or get me drunk. But I'd like to try it here and there. And as I got a little bit older, I started recognizing that Dad had a liquor cabinet in the kitchen. And so I decided to start experimenting. So I was probably in 6th grade. And we were talking about this, Deborah mentioned this on the way up, and I would make the neighborhood kids, because I always like to entertain as well, and I still do like to entertain. And so the kids would come over, and it had to be about 6th grade, Pee Wee's Playhouse. Anybody remember Pee Wee's Playhouse? So Saturday mornings, I'd have my friends come over, and I'd make them vodkas and Pepsis, and we would watch Pee Wee's Playhouse. We didn't have orange juice in our house, so we had Pepsi and water, so it was Pepsi. And nothing that got us, drunk, but we would made Pee Wee's Playhouse a little bit more exciting. So just experimenting here and there. Again, not a daily drinker, not a weekly drinker, not a monthly drinker. It wasn't an every Saturday thing. But then, of course, got a little bit older, and met a friend of mine, and she had the same kind of vivaciousness that I did. She wanted to have some fun, and so we did. She had an older sister, and we were hanging out one night with them, and of course that in itself was super cool, because we were probably 8th grade, and we were hanging out with the juniors in high school, and they were partying, and we asked if we could have something to drink. And so they got a bowl of ice, and I'm assuming the beer wasn't cold yet, and so they rolled the beer in ice to get it cold real quick. Gave us some beers. I can't tell you what it was. I can't tell you how many I had to drink. I can't tell you how it made me feel when I took that first sip, but it changed everything. I felt like I was a part of. I felt like I was part of that crowd, and I felt super cool. And so we did a bunch of stupid stuff that night. They laughed at us a whole lot, and then we passed out in her parents' bedroom because they weren't there. And I woke up, the next day, I'm assuming, and I wanted to do it again. And I did, as much as I possibly could. I believe from the minute I took a sip of alcohol, I wanted to do it all the time. I wanted to do it as much as I possibly could. And we did, well, I won't say we, but she was my partner in crime for quite some time. But I did. When I was able to, I did. I started sneaking more from my dad. But again, it was like a Saturday morning thing. It wasn't, after school or when I was studying or anything like that. It was just, just to have fun. And also when that happened, my lies really started taking off. We had somehow gotten some Mad Dog 2020, and me and my friend, and we were going to drink it. And so we sat on her back porch with a cigarette. We each had cigarettes, and had the Mad Dog, held our nose, took a sip of the Mad Dog, a drag of the cigarette, and that's how we proceeded to drink this bottle of Mad Dog. Well, we didn't want anybody to know about it, so we stuck it in her sister's bag in her closet. Well, of course, the mother found the bottle and wanted to know what happened. Well, her sister was not going to lie for us. So what we came up with was that some friends of ours were drinking one night, and they didn't want to throw the bottle away at their house. So they asked us to get rid of it. Makes absolutely no sense at all. Now that I have an 18-year-old, I would have called her out in a minute. But so they wanted us to dispose of this bottle, and so we brought it home. Well, we didn't want to throw it in just any trash can, so we brought it home and put it in her sister's bag. And that's just a little taste of just outlandish lies that just started, and it did over and over and over again, any way that I could to get away with what I wanted to do. And my mom and dad, they were happily married, but it's almost like there was a competition in my head between the love for my dad and the love for my mom, like from them, not from me. And so I always knew from day one that I could manipulate my parents very, very easily. There are things that my dad, on his deathbed, he never knew that I did. And there were things that my mom, to this day, doesn't know that I did, but the other one does. And I knew that, and I used that very well to do what I wanted to do. And so as I aged, I told you that me and my dad liked to drink together, and we did. That was a thing that we bonded over, was drinking. 13 years old, he'd take me to state football games, and I'd get to drink off the keg, and I thought it was awesome. We were driving home one night. Actually, he was driving home one night, and looked straight through me. I was in the front seat of the car, and he looked straight through me, and he said, I have absolutely no idea where I am. And I thought it was the greatest thing in the world. I thought it was wonderful. I went home, and I told all my friends about it, and they thought it was hilarious, and it was like, that's so cool. I never felt afraid. I wasn't worried. I just thought it was awesome, and I wanted to be a part of that. And I did. Like I said, I continued to drink throughout middle school and high school, but I also had another thing that I really liked, and that was boys. And so that took precedence a lot. A lot of the gentlemen that I surrounded myself with didn't like the way I acted when I was drinking. Weird. I like to act out. I was trouble, Steve. I was trouble. And so I drank. I did. When I drank, I did drink alcoholically in high school, but I wasn't. Again, I wasn't a daily drinker, but I did drink as much as I possibly could, whenever I possibly could. And I did drink to get drunk for oblivion. So when I decided that I was going to go to college, I knew I needed to get out of Wilson. I always felt like I was bigger than Wilson. There was more for me out there than Wilson. Wilson is a small little town. It was really small when I was 18 years old. And I wanted something bigger and I wanted something better. So I applied to 2 colleges, Appalachian and East Carolina University. I don't even remember if I got into Appalachian or not. I didn't really care. I got into ECU though, and that was awesome. It was right up the road, and I was super excited about it. My orientation, I was actually thinking about this the other day. My daughter's getting ready to go to college, and my orientation, I remember I met a girl that was sharing my room with me, and we came back to Wilson and decided to just get wasted. So I knew nothing about ECU at all. We just decided, because we knew we could drink at Wilson. We couldn't drink at ECU at that time because we were underage. And so that she never ended up coming to college, so I didn't go in with a drinking partner. But I very quickly found him when I got there. I started a job. I got a job with some friends, a family friend got me a job at a bookstore, and I fell in with a crowd that drank like I did, and we just started partying, and it was just off to the races. So just real quick, when I start with ECU, so I don't bore you with all my time there, I don't remember a lot of it. So I started at East Carolina University in the fall of '96. I left Greenville in 2007, and I am still a freshman. So that lets you know what I did at East Carolina University. I did not do a lot of class. I very quickly realized that people did not have class when I did. Everybody didn't go to school at the same time. So when they didn't go to school and they wanted somebody to hang out with, that's what I did. 6 months in, first semester in, I got a nice letter, because back in the day, they'd send them to you. They wouldn't send them to your parents. So they sent me a very nice letter asking me to not come back, to take a break. And I went to my mama and daddy and told them that I needed to take a break, that this was really hard for me coming into school, and that I needed to take some time off. And I remember my mom, she's been in Al-Anon, and I'll talk about that too in a minute, but for years and years. And when we did a dual talk when I was about 2 years sober, and that was the first time she found out about that. All the stuff she heard in my story, she was more mad about that than she was all the other stuff. It was funny. It's funny to me. It wasn't funny to her. So I decided to take some time off, but I talked them into letting me stay there. I didn't take a whole lot of time off, just that next semester, and came right back in and tried to do this thing. That's what I was going to do. I didn't know what I wanted to do at ECU. Well, yeah, I did. I actually, my goal at East Carolina University was I wanted to be able to drink a case of beer by myself. And when I left Greenville, I was able to do that. Yeah, goals, right? Big goals that I had for myself. And I'm not going to bore you with my East Carolina time, just give you a little snippet. So when I was at East Carolina, and after working the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous and learning some about myself and my defects and motives, I was so consumed with self when I was at East Carolina. And I mean, my whole entire life, I was completely consumed with self. Somebody made a statement earlier about keeping your eyes on me. And I said, I like when people keep their eyes on me, and that's what I was, and still am. So to me, self-centeredness and selfishness are two different things. Like, selfishness is I want what you have. Like, I want your phone case, or I want your water bottle, or I want your sunglasses. But self-centeredness is like, okay, so all of y'all are looking at me right now, right? And y'all are thinking about me because I'm talking. So when you go home, you're going to tell everybody about what I said. And then they're going to tell everybody what I said. And soon everybody in Southern Pines is going to be talking about me. And that's what I liked and what I wanted. I wanted you to be thinking about me, talking about me. I didn't care whether it was good or bad or ugly. That's what I liked. I liked all eyes on me. And I still do, sometimes. So at ECU, well, I'm not going to say ECU because obviously I didn't spend a whole lot of time at ECU. When I was in Greenville, there was one time in particular where I was, I like to drink on the job. I had many jobs when I was in Greenville because I don't know about you guys, but if things get hairy, I run, right? Like if somebody tells me I don't like the way you're drinking, all right, then I'll go hang out with you. Well, Meredith, you acted like an idiot last night. All right, well, we'll go over here tomorrow night. You know, I didn't hang around if I didn't like the way things were going. Same thing with jobs. If I made a fool out of myself at a job, which I did quite a few times, I'd just leave. No 2 weeks notice, nothing like that. I'd just take off. Relationships, school too. And so, but like I said, I like to drink on the job, and I was doing that one night, and I ended up getting off work. A friend of mine came in. He was a little bit more intoxicated than I was, so I felt like I should probably drive. I like to drink and drive too. I did that quite often. I really enjoyed driving under the influence of alcohol and whatever else I could get. But we were going to go to a party, and I had this awesome little Honda Prelude 5-speed. Love that thing. Had four-wheel steering, or four-wheel, all four wheels turned. It was awesome. And it was like a little race car. It was so cool. And so we were driving to this party, and I took a wrong turn, so I backed up, and somebody threw something in my car. So I told you guys I like to be bad, right? I like to be tough. So I reversed it, rolled down the window, and I was like, what's up? And I'm like 5 feet tall, but when I'm drinking, I'm 10 foot and bulletproof, right? And so these guys, my friend gets out of the car, kind of rolls out of the car to go talk to these gentlemen that threw something in my car, and 6 of them come out and end up beating him to the ground. So I get out of the car, and I assume that I was going to try to help him. I don't remember what happened. I just remember when I came to, one side of my face hurt and another side of my rear hurt. So I must have gotten hit. But when I came to, he was on all fours, spitting up blood, trying to get up, real incoherent. And so waved somebody down, which I was incoherent as well because I was super intoxicated. Waved somebody down who got an ambulance. So normal person would have got in their car, if they weren't drunk, and had followed the ambulance or even gotten in the ambulance. I got back into my vehicle, drove back to the bar that we had left, had a drink so I could tell everybody at the bar what had happened to me. Because that's what it had happened to me. It was devastating. It was traumatic, and I needed a drink, and I needed people to know what had happened. I then still didn't go to the hospital. I went to another place because I needed, I think Tony D calls it smokable alcohol. I needed some of that to calm myself down. And so I went to somebody else's house and let them know what had happened. And then after about an hour, I finally made it to the hospital to check on my friend that had defended me in that altercation. He ended up being fine. He had a concussion, and he got out of the hospital, went back to work, and everything was fine for him. Me, however, decided that I needed to drop out of school. Things were bad. That was rough, and I couldn't handle it. So again, because like I said, I'd gone back to school, so I dropped out that semester so I could center myself again. I don't really know what my excuse was that time that I verbalized, but I needed to. I couldn't do school. It was too overwhelming. So I did that several times in and out of school. There was a lot of those times. Just didn't make the test. I'll drop this class, or I'll drop out of school. That was my answer. I'll leave. Same thing with apartments, jobs. I think I got fired from one job. All the other ones I just left. And the one job I got fired from, I shouldn't have gotten fired from. They said I was a felon. That was the one time I was called a felon. They said I wrote a bad check. I didn't write I have wrote bad checks, but I did not at that time. That was not the case. And that was the Estee Lauder job. That's when I was an Estee Lauder girl, which was probably not the right job for me anyway. So anyway, in Greenville, and just doing all kinds of things. Like I said, self, completely consumed with self. And drinking, all the time, blowing through friends, had was renting a place with some ladies that I worked with, and just didn't care how my drinking was affecting other people. I got fired, I was talking about it on the way up here, I got fired from a job with one of my very, very best friends, actually the godmother of my daughter. She fired me. I was the assistant manager, and I was the only one on duty that night, and I thought it would be a really good idea to come around the other side of the bar and let my bartender serve me. and see how they're doing, right? Make sure they're doing their job right. And they didn't think that was a good idea. And so they fired me the next day, and I remember I was so angry about it. So how could they do that to me? I'm your friend. We've drank together. I could not see what my drinking was causing other people. And I remember Emily sat over there across from me and cried. And I was like, Meredith, I don't want to do this. You're a fabulous worker when you're not drunk. You're good at what you do. I love you. And I said some really ugly things to her, and I believe I kicked the door on the way out and went down to another bar down the road and got a job down there. Just could not see what I was causing my friends and also my family. My mom and dad, my mom had been in Al-Anon, and my dad was a heavy drinker and drank alcoholically for quite some time. She wanted us to do an intervention for my dad, and she wanted me to do this on Halloween. And I don't know if y'all know anything about Greenville at all, but you don't do interventions on Halloween. That's just not what you do. And so I remember thinking, how could she ask me to do this? That's crazy. But she decided to do it at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and that worked for me. I was able to go and be able to do that. And I told y'all that me and my dad bonded over alcohol, and we did. But I did know that what my dad's drinking was doing to him at his job, with his relationship with my mom. Honestly, for me, it was fine for me because I was not there. I wasn't living in it. So it was me asking my dad to stop doing something that I knew was harming the family, but also stop doing something that me and him, the one thing me and him had in common. So that was hard to do. But went down 2 o'clock in the afternoon, said what I needed to say, got right in my car and left and went back to Greenville and did what I wanted to do. That same dual talk that me and my mom did, that's when I found out what happened after that. I never asked. I didn't care. And I hate to say that, but it's the absolute truth. I didn't care. I did what I was asked to do. Now let me go do what I want to do, because that's all I cared about. I wanted to go and get wasted. And he did. He stayed sober for a little while, but ended up drinking again. And so that was just me. I was completely consumed with me and what I wanted to do. And so I had pretty much chased everybody off and was at a party one night, and a young man walked by me and he said, "You're cute." And I said, "So are you." And we started a relationship that night. And it was funny. I used to tell my sponsor when I first got sober that relationship lasted like 8 years. It was maybe 3 or 4. It wasn't that long, but we were both on that path. We both liked to drink, and as long as we drank, we got along just fine. I'm very blessed that gentleman came into my life, because he gave me my daughter, and I can call him a gentleman today, and I used not to be able to do that. We lived in Greenville for quite some time, and it was just a roller coaster. We were not a roller coaster; it was a circle. We would just go back around and around and around and doing the same things over and over and over again. I ended up getting pregnant, and I remember I went to my grandmother's, and I was throwing up, and I thought I was hungover. And Granny says, "Meredith, when are you going to tell me what's going on? When are you going to tell me you're pregnant?" I was like, "I'm not pregnant, Granny. No, there's no way I'm pregnant." Well, Granny speaks, you listen, right? And so I went home and I got a pregnancy test, and I was 3 months pregnant. And so I did cut down somewhat, and I always say, I'd love to tell you that I quit drinking, and that was the end of it that day, and it wasn't. I used to tell people, or I used to think that, and I told people too, that, had he not brought it into the house, I wouldn't have drank. He never held me down or poured anything down my throat. That was all me. And that's not anything that I can put on another human being. So very blessed to have a beautiful little girl that was born. And I stayed sober for 2 weeks, and then it was right back off to the races. I continued to do what I'd always done. Because one particular reason is, babies cry. And I don't like that. I don't like to feel bad. I don't like to feel like I'm not doing what I need to do. And she had a little chair that would go way too fast. I feel like they probably have taken it off the market. At least it felt like it was going really fast to me, but it would make her start crying. And we were some very sketchy people. I remember I used to say too that we had some sketchy people in that house, and we were the two sketchiest ones. Let me not put that on him. I was one of the sketchiest ones that were there. I'm not going to put that on him because I'll take full responsibility for my sketchiness. There were some dangerous times. I remember thinking the other day, there were some people that came over. I can't tell you who those people were, but I remember there's only been probably 2 other times in my life that I've been so afraid for my life being in that house. I don't know what we did to them, but I know they were not there for good things for us. That came up in my head the other day at the meeting at home group, how afraid. That was so frightening because I didn't know whether we were going to walk out of there. Luckily we did. So anyway, I need to get sober. So I had the baby, and we ended up, my mom knew what was going on, so we moved back to Wilson. Mom and Dad asked if we wanted to come back to Wilson, and so we did. Same thing in Wilson. We were doing the same exact thing, drinking, smoking, doing all the stuff that we had done in Greenville, or that I had done in Greenville. I keep going to the we. I apologize for that I had done in Greenville. And something I knew needed to change. I guess maybe it was because I was living with my mom and dad, and I just felt their looks of disapproval every day when they saw me, but I felt like something needed to happen. I like to think it was, maybe at some point in time I was finally becoming willing to feel God around me as well. So I decided to get a job, and I got a job, and I was going to do this thing, and it was going to be wonderful. I got the job, and I started drinking immediately at the job. I had other people drinking at the job with me. Decided that job wasn't good because I was drinking there, so I got a job at a grocery store. I drank at the grocery store because there was a bar right down the road. So on my break, I'd walk down to the bar and have a couple shots and then come back to work. Okay, we got to stop doing this too. So I got another job at a coffee shop. Coffee shop was people were different there. People, their eyes were bright. They didn't smell, like I did. They smelled like coffee, and they were probably eyes bright because they were probably jacked up on coffee. But something was different. And so my thinking is that they weren't married, because at that point in time, me and this young man had gotten married. And so I felt like that was my problem. I always like to blame. Y'all may have gotten that by now. So I got rid of him. I asked him to leave. We were not in a great space anyway, but I asked him to leave because that was going to be my solution. That was going to help me to stop feeling the way that I felt. And when he did, other things left with him, and things that had enabled me to be able to drink the way I like to drink. And I'll leave it at that. If y'all have any questions, we'll talk about it later. But those things left, and I just kept drinking like I did and just started blacking out and blacking out and blacking out and blacking out. I was searching for something and anything, so I got into another relationship because that's usually the solution, right? We'll get into another relationship, and this will make it better, and so that's what I did. While I was in that relationship, I decided I'd try another one. And so I was married, living with somebody, and dating somebody else at the same time. All kinds of crazy, and still drinking like I was, and had a 2-year-old daughter, that I was trying to raise, and wasn't doing a very good job of it. I would drink. I remember she was in daycare, and I would drink at the pool across from her daycare until 5 o'clock when I would be able to pick her up. I remember taking her trick-or-treating and being so wasted that I peed behind the car while she went up to the door to get candy. That's one thing I'm really not proud of, especially when I drive by that house. I always remember that. But just the and again, completely not seeing the harm that I'm doing. The fact that every time that I put my little girl in the car, whether I was sober or not too sober, my mama saw me do that, and not knowing whether her daughter or her granddaughter was going to come back. That never crossed my mind. It wasn't a concern of mine. I'm fine, Mom. We'll be fine. Taking her to different places and meeting, having different people, and just all the stuff and the things that I did when I was drinking, and just never considered the harm that I was causing and what I was doing to the people that loved me and that were there for me. And so while I was at the coffee shop, I'm getting a little discombobulated. That was such a weird time. But at the coffee shop, let me back up. The lady I was living with was the first person that I recall ever questioning my drinking. She asked me, she said, "Why can't you stop?" I'd never thought about that before. I had never crossed my mind. Why would I stop? Why not just drink it till it's gone or till I pass out? And so she questioned me, and when she did, I was like, huh. And so I kind of attempted to. I kind of lied to her, too. I'd have 2 tabs running at the bar, so she wouldn't know how much I was drinking. But I was more aware of the amount of alcohol I was drinking, and somebody had now said something to me that I really cared about, and so I was starting to become more aware of it. And so at that point, like I said, married, living with somebody, and then this other relationship. This other relationship, I call him God Boy. I call him God Boy because he wanted to be a preacher, and he wanted me to be his preacher's wife, and he was going to save me from my alcoholism. He had been in AA and NA before, and he was going to help me, and that was great. He eventually was drinking after I got done with him, but he was going to save me. And so one day he called me up and he told me that God had spoke to him and that I was not the one for him. Now keep in mind that I had 3, and so I wasn't really thinking about a 1, but it devastated me. It absolutely broke me. And I remember making that conscious decision that I was going to go and I was going to just get, I'm going to drink. I was going to drink at him. I don't know if y'all have ever done that, drinking at people. So I was going to drink at him. So I went home and changed into my exercise clothes because I guess I was going to go run. That was my thought process. Went to the bar, had 2 shots of tequila, and that's the last thing I remember. Until I woke up beside my daughter's bed about 10 o'clock that night, which I drove her home from a friend's house that evening, and don't remember doing that. It took me about 2 years sober before I remembered who picked her up from daycare, because I was unable to do that. I got up the next morning and went to work at the coffee shop that morning, and I had to sit underneath my boss's desk for 2 hours until I was able to get up and do stuff. Then when she got there to relieve me, I laid in her car, actually, I think, for 3 hours until I was able to drive myself home. My daughter had gone to my mom's by that point, and so I was able to go back to my house with the person I lived with was living, and I remember being just so full of shame. That was only the second time in my drinking career that I remember feeling that shame. There was one other time when I was working at a bar, and I made a complete fool out of myself in front of people that knew me. And I think that's the only reason I felt that shame that day, not because of what I was doing, but because somebody had seen me. Because people knew me, and I'd been caught, and I didn't like that. I didn't want to be caught in my ugly, in my yuck. I could usually hold it together for the most part, and if I didn't, then I could just leave, right? And that's what I did with that job. I left that job. Never went back until I made my amends to my boss. But I remember that next day I asked my mom for some help. She'd been in Al-Anon, and she got a phone number for me. And I never called that phone number. I just held it in my hand all day long because I didn't know what to say. I didn't really like women. I didn't know what to say to a woman. And honestly, I didn't really want to do anything at that point in time. I just didn't want to feel that way anymore. I didn't want to feel that shame. So that second day where I had felt that shame, and I was sitting there nursing a hangover, something just jumped on me. That love and that grace, I think that Steve talked about, that I was able for the first time in 31 years to be willing to feel God, if that makes sense. I wanted something different. I was 31 years old. At this point, I was getting ready to move back in with my mom because the lady I was living with, she didn't like me a whole lot because I was doing a bunch of stuff that I shouldn't have been doing with somebody I was living with. And so I was getting ready to move back in with my mom and dad. I had absolutely no school, anything to come back from ECU, nothing to show for it. I had a 2-year-old daughter at the time that really didn't want anything to do with me. She really liked me because I was fun, but she didn't feel safe around me. She wanted to stay with my mom a lot. She didn't want to be around me. And that didn't bother me really that bad until that day. And so I called God Boy because God Boy had been in AA and NA before, and he gave me a phone number to a gentleman that was in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I found out where a meeting was, and I went to a meeting. I'm very grateful for my mom being in Al-Anon the many years that she was, because I had that connection. I knew where to go to, and she knew who to get that number. Because I knew, sorry, I'm backing up, I'm talking about the number. My mom, I had that Al-Anon background. She had that background, so I knew that AA was where I needed to go. Does that make sense? Sorry, I got a little tongue-tied there. And so I will mention that number real quick because since was obviously in my brain. The number that my mom got me, I was about 3 months sober, and she called me up and she said that number that I gave you, that was Deborah's number. And that's my sponsor that I have today. So even before I wanted anything to do with Alcoholics Anonymous or wanted anything to do with getting sober, God was trying to place a lady in my life to help me down that path. And she's been doing it now for a little over 13 years. So I went into my first meeting and I felt good. I felt comfortable. They were smiling at me and they liked me. They really liked that I worked at Starbucks at that time. They wouldn't let me bring coffee though because they said they were self-supporting, and that hurt my feelings. So I just gave it to the members. I didn't take it to the meeting. But I remember I got my first big book, and I just felt like that's where I was supposed to be. About 2 weeks in, after going to meetings, I hadn't quite opened my ears up enough to hear that solution, and I had some stuff that happened, and so I went out and I drank over it. I was very, very, very fortunate to come back in the very next day. I know lots of people that have not been that have not had that opportunity or taken that opportunity. So I came back in and I got doing the meetings, and I got me a sponsor because that's what y'all told me to do, and I got my sponsor for all the wrong reasons. She was cool looking, and I thought she'd let me do what I wanted to do. She did not, and so therefore I stopped talking to her. She very graciously told me that I needed to find somebody else that I would talk to, and so that's what I did. I found a gentleman that would listen and would talk to me, and we did do a lot of talking at first. We did, but we moved on to other things, and one of those things was he introduced me to my sponsor. He took me to a meeting where I got to meet my sponsor and hear her talk, and I remember I asked her to if she would work with me. And she said yes, and I was so excited, and immediately we started working. She would take me to meetings. She wanted me to get into service, not immediately, but we went to many midwinter conferences. We'd go to Canoga. We were busy. Like I said, me and this gentleman, we talked quite often, and then other things transpired, and I ended up pregnant. I mention that. I don't mention that to say, yes, get in a relationship in the very beginning of sobriety, but it is my story. And it made sobriety hard. I was getting sober. I had a 4-year-old at this time. I was pregnant. I was starting a new relationship with my now husband and other people in the program, and it was hard. We were suggested to have separate home groups, and that's how I ended up in Nashville. I was actually at Came to Believe, and then in Nashville. But we're making it, through the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. Each of us have kept our separate programs. It's not something that we don't work each other's program. He has his, and I have mine. Very rarely will you see us hanging out together. A lot of times we've done well. Our son now is 12 years old. So the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I stayed drunk way longer than I wanted to, has completely rearranged who I am. It's my motives and my thought processes are different than I ever thought that they possibly could be. Coming into Alcoholics Anonymous and having a lady show me how to live life soberly has been the most amazing thing that I ever could have been given. When I heard Deborah speak for the very first time, we had a lot of similarities. She had children. There's just a lot of similarities. But one thing in particular that stuck to me with Deborah is that she could look me in the eye. She could look other people in the eye. She held her head up high because she believed in herself and she believed in the program that saved her from the gates of death, right? And that's what I wanted from her. I wanted to be able to hold my head up high. When I came into Alcoholics Anonymous at 31 years old, I didn't even like looking at myself in the mirror. I didn't like who I was. I didn't like who I'd become. I didn't like what I'd done to my daughter, to my family, to my friends that I no longer had because I'd run them off. I had more or less told them that drinking was more important than anything that y'all are giving me. And so I had left. I was a lone wolf. Isn't that what our book says? We become lone wolves. And I was just living for me, right? And so to be able to do that and have somebody teach me how to hold my head up and be proud of who I am and the program that helped me get sober is amazing. To be able to share that with other women is even more amazing. I remember the first lady that I worked with, to see the light come on in her eyes was just the best gift I could have ever been given. She was a tough one too. She was absolutely amazing. But not only to see the light come on in her eyes, but to see her family be put back together, and the families that have been put back together. To see that today, my daughter, I'm not going to say she's 18, so she's feeling herself a little bit, but we're good friends. She comes to me, for advice. She doesn't always take it, which I can accept that today. But all that's Alcoholics Anonymous. That's all Alcoholics Anonymous. The principles that she throws out at me, the things that she's put, the tools that she's using in her life, that's Alcoholics Anonymous. That's not me. So, to speak on God and my relationship with God today. So, third step, when I did my third step, when I got my first big book, the third step was highlighted. So I started saying the third step very early in my sobriety, before I even knew what I was doing, right? And I don't know if that prepped me. I don't know if that, opened my heart. I'm sure it did. But when I did my third step, I can tell you what I was wearing. I can tell you where my now husband took our Cecilia to go play. It was May. It was hot. I was 8 months pregnant. I can be right there. I can close my eyes and I can be there. And when I got down on my knees with my sponsor and said that third step prayer together, I took a breath for the first time in 31 years. Like, that's what I felt like. And I didn't even realize I'd been holding my breath, right? And so I was very, very open to the idea of God and Him being in my life and allowing Him allowing myself to turn my life and my will over to God. And I've had ups and I've had downs throughout my journey. There was some stuff that happened. 3 years sober, and I'm so very thankful for the connection that I had with God at that time, because I don't know if I'd have gotten through it. I can't tell you that I wouldn't have drank. I remember I opened the refrigerator up at a friend's house, and there was green tea and there was Miller Lite, and it wasn't even an option. It wasn't even an option. I didn't even think about it till after I'd shut the refrigerator. And now it's not me, that's God, because my go-to is drinking or running, right? It's not let's drink green tea and work our way through this. But I had people in this program, my sponsor, and like I said, God, that walked me through it. There's been so many things that have happened in sobriety, good and bad, that I've been able to get through without a drink, without even thinking about a drink. So my dad passed away in 2018, and I remember when he passed. Well, we were at the hospital for about a week while he was there before he passed, and I've never felt God like I did in that hospital. Like, God was everywhere. He was in the bathroom. He was in the people that God placed there. He was everywhere. He was the presence was so full. He was everywhere. And then it was as hard of time as that is, and as weird as it feels to say it. It was one of the most beautiful experiences I've ever had when my dad passed. He knew I was sober. And I know he met God when he went, and it was just a beautiful experience. But when after he passed, it was like it got quiet. And I remember a friend of mine called me the next day, and he said, "What are you doing today?" And I said, "I don't know." I said, "I'm taking it minute by minute." And so I was right back to that first meeting, right, where I was just taking it one day at a time, minute by minute. That's all I could do. I wasn't able to do anything else. But I'm so grateful that I had the tools that Alcoholics Anonymous has given me to be able to get through that. And so minute by minute, day by day, week by week, year by year, that presence has grown more and more and more. And that wasn't because God went anywhere by any means. He was always there. He was always there. And so here lately, I feel like I've gotten more connected with God. Steve made the statement or said, sharing what I do to keep that connection with God today. I've gone back to that yet again, of doing what I was told out the gate, of hitting my knees every morning and talking to God and spending that time with God, because I've gotten away with it. I'll do it later, and that doesn't work for me. I have to do it, and I have to do it all the time. I have to talk to him all the time. So then, funny story is, I hurt my knee, and so then I couldn't get down on my knees. Well, now what am I going to do? And it sounds crazy for me to say that out loud, because I know I can talk to God anywhere. I don't have to get on my knees. But my head goes, well, you can't get on your knees, so how are you going to do this? And for about a week, I didn't talk to him. And then it was he's like, stop, Meredith. So I remember somebody told me, they're like, lay on the floor. Just pray. And so that's what I did. And it's it's been amazing. I feel him stronger than I have in a long time. In a long, long time. In the people he's placed in my life, not only with you guys, but it's also this program has enabled me to be able to have a relationship with a church again, and to bring ladies and gentlemen into my life that are bringing me closer to God and helping me to grow deeper in that. And then too with my home group, one of the ladies that I sponsor, she helps me tremendously with my relationship with God. Taking her back through the steps and working on our principles, and pointing out the things that for her to practice, but also for me to practice, and how important that is. This program absolutely saved my life, and I thank God for it every single day. I thank God for the people that he's placed in my life through this program. It has made me a woman I never thought that I wanted to be. All y'all sucked. I didn't want anything, I didn't want but to be on a Thursday night. It's Thursday. I'm not supposed to be in a church, telling people how I got sober. I'm supposed to be out drinking. This wasn't going to be fun for me. But it's turned into a life so full, so full. Mama looked at me today. She goes, you look really tired. It's not something you really want to hear. Kind of hurt my feelings, because I was getting ready to come see y'all. But I don't have to drink over that today, right? I can get my feelings hurt and not drink. My mom, she's getting older, and she likes me today. She thinks I'm a good mom today. She thinks I'm a good wife. I have a husband that likes me, which is really cool. And I have 2 kids that my son came into my room last night, and he's like, Mom, I'm trying to live by y'all's example. Which is not always perfect, but that was cool, I'm very, very blessed. I'm like I said, AA gave me a life that I never thought I wanted. It enabled me to do all the things that I used to think I did really, really well, that I didn't. That I'm able to do those again and be relatively good at them, as long as I stay plugged in, continue to work the steps, continue to take ladies through the steps. Talk to God, and continue to hang out with you guys. So, thank you.